الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we seek His blessings and we seek His pleasure. And we send peace and blessings upon His beloved messenger Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and upon his family and upon his companions and upon all those who follow him until the day of judgment. Allahumma ja'alna minhum, may Allah make us amongst them. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. When people reflect about how they're supposed to improving their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how they're supposed to practice Islam, usually the first thing that comes to mind is ritual acts of worship. And a lot of times actually, when you think about connecting yourself with Allah, you limit it to only ritual acts of worship. So somebody might think about prayer, somebody might think about fasting, somebody might think about giving donations, giving sadaqah, giving zakat. And although these are the foundations of our connection with Allah, these are the pillars that upon which everything else is built, our connection with Allah goes much beyond that. And one of the really important aspects of our connection with Allah is actually our emotions and our mindset and approach to life in general, right? And really making sure that our emotions are in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And one particular emotion that a lot of us struggle with because of many, many reasons is this emotion of having reliance and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason why people struggle with this so much as opposed to some of the other emotions is because human beings by nature love certainty. Every single one of us feel very comfortable in certainty. And all of a sudden when we're placed in situations in which there is uncertainty, that's when all of a sudden things get very uncomfortable. And depending on what the exact situation is, what scenario you're in, it'll vary in levels, but without a doubt, it is of human nature to just crave and want certainty. And by definition, tawakkul, having trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, requires you to be comfortable with uncertainty. And that's something that's very difficult for a lot of us to build within our lives. It's very difficult to come to terms with because, again, it sometimes goes against what seems to be natural for us. But we have to remember that this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like Allah commands and our religion teaches us to pray and to fast and to do all of these other things, Allah commands tawakkul in the Quran. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. He says, and place your trust in Allah, have trust in Allah, have total, absolute reliance on Allah if you are believers. So all of a sudden we are seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us that actually a foundational aspect of our faith, something that's so important to us even calling ourselves believers in Allah, is having this trust in Allah, having that ultimate reliance on Allah. So this is a huge foundational aspect of our religion. And it's something that, as I mentioned, is extremely important to our connection with Allah because it is a sign of our faith. Having tawakkul in itself is a sign of faith because Allah mentions that for people who have tawakkul, they are of the believers. So to help build this into our lives in a very practical way, I want to focus on two things. Firstly, what are the actual tangible benefits that somebody would receive when they start to build tawakkul into their life? What is the outcome of that action? Not in the hereafter, because I think every one of us know, yes, when you have tawakkul, when you do the things that Allah describes and the things that Allah commands and that the Prophet ﷺ commanded, then yes, you'll go to Jannah. So we know the ultimate outcome is paradise. But as human beings, again, we crave something faster. We look for instant gratification. And although this is not something instant, there are benefits that we can see tangibly in our life, in this life. So we'll focus on two of the major benefits that you get from building tawakkul, firstly. And then secondly is, what are the actual practical steps that now we can all take that, inshallah, as we leave, what can we do to build tawakkul in our lives in a way that's practical? Because it's something that many of us struggle with. So firstly, the benefits of tawakkul. Number one is that it gives the individual absolute peace of mind, right? And this is something that is so beautiful because where we find discomfort in being in situations that are uncertain, if you have tawakkul, now all of a sudden you find comfort even in those situations. You find that you have peace of mind even in those situations. And actually this affects us on two different levels. Firstly, is that you have assurance and confidence and comfort in the future. Right? Because you know that although you have no idea what the true outcome of something is going to be, you don't know what the outcome of your job application is going to be. You don't know what the true outcome of your exam is going to be. You don't know what the true outcome of your even all the, your entire collective years in college are going to be. You don't know. You have an assumption, you have a hope based on what other people have done, but you don't truly know what's going to happen to you. None of us do. And so when you have true tawakkul in Allah, even though you don't know the exact outcome, you have assurance and confidence in the future because you know that the plan comes from Allah and Allah is the best of planners. That the actual outcome is not as important as knowing who designed it, right? You come to terms with the fact that, okay, I have maybe a certain perception about what I want the outcome to be, but there's someone that has total comprehensive knowledge that I don't have, and because of that, his plan is better. And you find comfort in that. So you find comfort in the future, but also having tawakkul in Allah helps you weather the storm for things that happened to you in your past. So you put in the effort, you went through a job application process. Many of us are struggling with that now, and you go through all of the steps, and at the end of the day, you don't get that offer, or you don't do well on that exam, or something that you wanted that you were really working towards doesn't happen, even though you tried your best. But what tawakkul does is that it allows you to reflect on that moment and say to yourself, actually, even though I really wanted that thing and it didn't happen, there must be something better here for me. There must be something that I'm missing. There must be something that's beneficial in this that I can't understand at this moment. And maybe Allah will allow you to understand that in the future, but maybe not. But you find comfort in that. You find comfort in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the best plan. So you have this total feeling of peace of mind, both for what comes in the future and whatever happened in your past, right? Whatever situations you had to face, you find comfort in all of those. So that's the first major benefit, right? And the second one kind of builds off of this peace of mind is that you find this comfort and you find this ultimate connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all aspects of your life, right? That tawakkul itself brings you closer to Allah. It allows you to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that's very beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, a very deep verse, and let this sit and simmer and reflect on this in all aspects of your life, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever has tawakkul on Allah, whoever relies on Allah, whoever places their trust in Allah, then Allah is enough for them. Right? And that seems very simple, but if you think about it, it's actually extremely deep. Because what that means is that actually the outcomes of things don't even matter to you anymore as long as you have Allah with you in all scenarios. That you find this beautiful connection with Allah in which now it's as if Allah is with you wherever you go. That Allah is guiding you along every single path that you take in life. That even when you yourself, you're not certain about something, you're confused, you're leaning one way or the other, you're not really sure how to go about something, you find this connection with Allah that helps guide you through, because now all of a sudden you realize that Allah is with you wherever you go. Right? It's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, that Allah is with you wherever you go. And so now you don't place such a burden on yourself to figure everything out. And you don't have this paralyzing fear of the future because Allah is connected to you wherever you go. So these are two major benefits that come from having that true reliance and tawakkul on Allah, is that you have this peace of mind for everything in your life, future and past, and you also feel this intimate connection with Allah wherever you go. Right? So with these two benefits in mind, and these are things that, again, we should constantly remind ourselves of, are the benefits that we receive in this life, what are some practical ways that we can actually build trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because conceptually, it sometimes comes off as being very abstract. It's like, it's a mindset, it's an emotion, it's something that is, between you and Allah. It's very intimate to who you are as an individual. And so sometimes people look at that and they say, well, I don't really know how to build that in my life because it's such an abstract concept. But actually there's many practical steps that you and I can take to help bring this into our life. And I'll mention 3 of them, right? 3 practical steps to build tawakkul in your life is, number 1 is to understand, or actually number 1 is to give your best effort all the time along with your tawakkul. Okay, so sometimes people, they have the misunderstanding that having trust in Allah means the absence of effort, means the absence of doing work, right? Because as long as I have the trust in Allah, Allah's plan is best, then that's enough. But actually, we find in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, someone also had this misunderstanding, and the Prophet ﷺ corrected it. And it's a hadith that many of us are familiar with. We've heard many times. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Should I tie my camel?" For us, as a modern example of what that means is, should I lock my doors to my car when I leave it, or should I just leave it open and Allah will take care of whatever is in there, or the doors to your house, for example? Do I lock my doors, or do I just place my trust in Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel while putting your trust in Allah. So give it your best effort while putting trust in Allah. Now, the other thing that people misunderstand about this concept is sometimes this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel, then put your trust in Allah. But that's actually an inaccurate understanding. Because what that means is, you give it your best effort, you give 100% of your effort, you do everything you can in your power, and then at the very end of it, you bring Allah into the picture and you say, okay, whatever the outcome is from Allah. That's only halfway there. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel while putting your trust in Allah. So your trust in Allah should be throughout the process of your effort. Right? Application. Your trust in Allah is in searching for the job to even apply for it. Your trust in Allah is then in building up your resume to then apply, is the actual act of applying. It stays with you throughout the interview process. Your trust in Allah stays with you when you get the offer, right? After you begin working. That trust in Allah is something that should follow you throughout the entire process of your effort. But you need to give it an effort, because the Prophet ﷺ said that effort is important, right? And we see this throughout his life, that he never just sat back and just waited for whatever Allah wanted. He went out and he did work, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so we take from that example. The second practical step towards building tawakkul in our life is to study the examples of tawakkul, right? Of people who had really good reliance on Allah, to reflect on those, to study those examples. Now, there's 2 really good opportunities for that. Is number 1, obviously, the one that most of us think of immediately, is in the Quran and the Sunnah, right? We look at the stories of previous prophets, for example, and we see the trust that the Prophet ﷺ had before Badr, when it was 300 Muslims against 1,000 in a battle, and he had absolute trust in Allah, no matter, even though those odds were heavily not in his favor, right? But the Prophet ﷺ had trust. So you see that example. Or you look at Musa Sadiq, who, when he was leading Bani Israel away from Fir'aun, and he's being chased by the army. This is one of the most beautiful and detailed examples in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the army of Fir'aun is literally chasing after them. They're on the run. And when they're running and they're trying to seek that escape, and then all of a sudden they meet, the front of a sea. There's nowhere to go. Behind them they go, or that they look, is now there's an ocean in front of them, there's water in front of them, and there's nothing they can do. And in fact, in that moment, what you see is a reaction that many of us would take, right? Is that Bani Israel says that you've led us to our doom. right along with it, and they were ready and they were seeking that freedom. But then they see this ocean in front of them, this sea in front of them, and now all of a sudden they say that, we're doomed, we're going to get captured. And Musa a.s. responds with the absolute trust in Allah, and he says, "Kalla inna ma'i rabbi sayahdeen." He says, "No, my Lord is with me. He's going to guide us through. He's going to guide us through." And at that moment, Allah split the sea for them. Right? Allah opened doors that none of them could have even imagined. Right? Nobody would have even imagined that as being an outcome. It's so you see these examples, and so the practical thing here is to go and look at these examples, because there are tons. I mentioned just two of them. There's dozens throughout the Quran. There are dozens that the Prophet ﷺ mentions in the Sunnah that we can look at. But the other thing that we should not forget about is to also look for examples of tawakkul in our lives and in the lives of the people around us. Right? Because sometimes you'll see, a friend of yours or a family member that goes through something serious in their life. They go through, some major setback, some major calamity in their life, or they're going through major uncertainties in their life. And you see that they had this true trust in Allah, this true reliance on Allah, and it gets them through it. And you see that in your family members, you see that in your friends, you see that in people around you, and it gets them through it. So you take from their example and you try to bring that in your life. So it's not just about, looking at the stories of the prophets and looking at what the Prophet ﷺ came with. Those are important. But in our lives today are also signs for people who are looking for them. You just have to open your eyes and reflect and really think about it. And then the third thing that we can do to practically build tawakkul into our lives is to increase in our self-reflection and gratitude, in particular gratitude, right? Because it's very easy for us to focus as human beings on all the things that go wrong, that in our head the most. Our car starts up perfectly 364 days out of the year is the day that we remember. The one day that it doesn't start is the day that we remember. Right? When things are going completely fine, we forget about that. And so when you actually reflect on those moments, what you start to see is Allah's absolute perfection in His design. Right? How many times have you been driving on the road, on the highway, and you see in front of you an accident that's being cleaned up, right? Cars that are overturned in the middle of the road, crazy accidents that happen, and you just drive past it without reflecting, and you think for a moment, what if you had left your house just half a minute before? Right? What if you had left your house just a minute earlier? That could have been you, right? And if you take a moment just to reflect, and sometimes you really, some of us even have the real experience of seeing an accident happen in front of us, right? And that really can shake somebody, but it can bring you so much closer to Allah with the right mindset, because then you realize and you have gratitude over Allah's perfect design. And you focus on all of these cases in which it seemed, instead of focusing only on the things that went poorly, now all of a sudden you focus on the things that went really well, right? And you increase in your gratitude. And what that does is that allows you to build in your tawakkul. So these are three things that we can take to build in our, increase in our tawakkul in Allah. SubhanAllah, bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So to conclude, we talked again, for those that came late, we're talking about how to increase in our reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First we talked about the benefits of tawakkul, that it brings you the peace of mind, that it connects you with Allah, and then some practical steps that we can take towards increasing in our reliance on Allah, in our tawakkul in Allah, by giving it our best effort always, no matter what, always putting our best effort forward in reflecting on the things that happen in our life and having that gratitude, and in studying the examples of people who have great tawakkul, the people who have great reliance on Allah. And there's one hadith that I want to end with, inshallah, that to me is like a beautiful, beautiful example of what it means to truly feel that reliance on Allah and what that can do for for somebody throughout their life, in which the Prophet ﷺ was speaking to a young companion, right? Not unlike any of us in the room. And he said to him that he was going to start giving him some advice. And it's a very lengthy hadith, and I'll just focus on the last portion of the hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he's advising him. And he tells him that وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ. He says to him, know that if the entire collection of humanity, every single person in the world, right, really internalize what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here, because it's beautiful. He says, if every single person in the world came together to benefit you with something, they would never be able to benefit you except with what Allah has already written for you. Right? Notice, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that this is not just, if the college professor was coming together to give you a good grade, or if that managing director came together to give you a good job. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, if all of humanity came together, every single person in the world came together with the one goal of benefiting you with something, they would never be able to benefit you except that Allah had already written that for you. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, and if they were to come together, all of humanity were to come together to harm you with something, لَمْ يَضُرُّكَ, they would never be able to harm you except with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already written for you. Right? So this concept really puts into perspective this concept of tawakkul is through the words of the Prophet ﷺ, that he's saying that people really have no power over anything. Right? And even if everyone were to come together to either benefit you or harm you with something, they wouldn't be able to do anything except that Allah had already willed that for you. They wouldn't have been able to do anything except that Allah had already planned that for you. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he closes this hadith by saying, رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجَفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. He says, the pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. Right? Like it's already set in stone. It's already ready for you. So go easy on yourself, because the outcomes of everything is already determined by Allah. Right? People, this reliance, to have true reliance on Allah is to have less reliance on people. Right? And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us through this beautiful hadith, and it's something that I hope all of us can remember as we go through, the wear and tear of the dunya, the wear and tear of daily life, the struggles that we face on a regular basis, that this can be something that we turn back to what the Prophet ﷺ said and find comfort in it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to be people who increase in our tawakkul. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to be people who reflect on the stories of the past and the stories of the current, to find lessons in tawakkul and implement that in our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to find comfort in our reliance on Him in all situations in our life. Ya Allah, all those who are struggling with the uncertainties of life, with struggles in their classes and on exams and on job hunting and on all the different struggles that they could be having, Allah grant them confidence in what they are doing and comfort, and make it easy for them. And Ya Allah, those that have ease in their life and they're finding comfort in things that are going their way in their classes and in their exams and in their job hunting and everything else, Allah grant them gratitude in that and continue to bless them with ease. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adl wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idukum la'allakum tadhakkarun wa aqimus salat.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Keep your line straight, shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, leave no gaps, keep close together. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إن بطش ربك لشديد إنه هو يبدئ ويعيد وهو الغفور الودود ذو العرش المجيد فعال لما يريد هل أتاك حديث الجنود فرعون وثمود بل الذين كفروا في تكذيب والله من ورائهم محيط بل هو قرآن مجيد في لوح محفوظ. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.